Hello and welcome to Car Dealer Live. My name is James Batchelor, and today we are looking at the challenges women are facing in the car buying process, particularly when it comes to electric cars. Now, joining me to discuss more about this is the motoring journalist and Auto Trader editorial director, and a good pal of mine, Erin Baker. Hello, Erin.
Hello.
Thank you so much for joining us today. How are you?
I'm good, thanks. Thanks for having me on.
No, it's lovely to have you on. And it's great we're able to give a bit of airtime to this sort of issue. Well, I say issue, I mean it's been a part of the industry for too long, really, hasn't it? And effectively with electric cars, it's coming under the spotlight a little bit more, I think. So you've recently launched a report, haven't you, entitled No Driver Left Behind: Women and the Journey to Electric. Can we just start by delving into the problems that you've uncovered? I mean, ultimately, is there really an issue with women and electric cars right now?
Yes, that's it. Should we go? There's a huge issue. There's a huge gender gap in automotive anyway, right? We know that both on a B2B level and a B2C level, meaning there aren't enough women inside the industry, there aren't enough women in OEMs, there aren't enough women in retailers, there aren't enough women in my space, in motoring journalism. You know, there are about 250 motoring journalists in this country, and about 10 of us are women. So there's this humongous gender gap all over the place. You look at the stats from the Automotive 30% Club, Julia Muir, who does a really good job there, that will show you that the automotive workforce, I think in the UK, is about 20% women, but that falls to about 10% at executive level. So everywhere you look, there aren't enough women. Now, why is that an issue? Because then we look at the consumer. And we look at the consumer, the drivers out there who we're trying to sell cars to, we're trying to engage as an audience, depending on what side of the equation you come from. You know, women are half the population. They are almost half of the drivers out there, but 47% of license holders in this country are women. And actually that's growing at a faster rate than men. So more and more women are getting their license. More and more women are buying cars. More and more women are financially independent in this country. We saw in lockdown that more and more women were buying vans because they were starting up their own businesses. More and more women are becoming not only the influencer behind the purchase of the car, but are being the primary purchaser. You know, 41% of vehicles in this country have women as their primary registered keeper. So if we look at this kind of these stats on the consumer side, 40%, 50% of cars, licenses, etc., owned by women. In no sector of the automotive industry is the percentage of women in any position anywhere at 40 or 50%. So huge disparity. Then we come to electric cars, where we assumed that, I certainly, and I've been a motoring journalist for 20 years, banging on about the underrepresentation of women. I assumed that electric cars would be the first opportunity for us to really narrow that gender gap, because without any of us who are involved in the industry doing anything, I assumed that gender gap would naturally narrow, because women love sustainable products. If you look outside of automotive to other verticals, women are really interested, have always been really interested, more interested than men, in buying sustainable makeup, sustainable fashion, sustainable leather goods, sustainable everything, travel, everything. So we assume that, you know, electric cars, the conversation is not about powertrains, it's not about kind of chassis and engineering and oversteer and naturally aspirated V12s. All that goes out of the window. And instead, we're talking about a very lifestyle orientated product with sustainable materials, increasingly really easy software, acting as a concierge service for your lifestyle needs, all this thing. We would naturally engage more women. So, but it didn't seem to be happening. So Auto Trader commissioned this report, No Driver Left Behind: Women and the Journey to Electric. And it not only confirmed our fears, but actually it's worse than we imagined. You know, the gender gap is widening. Women are not buying electric cars. Out of all the EV owners in this country, I think, or rather, sorry, no, to rephrase that, men 16% of men drive electric cars and only 7% of women drive electric cars. So there's a huge disparity. There's another report out the other day that said that only 1 in 10 electric vehicle owners were women. So something is going wrong, and we wanted to find out what.
Yeah. So, I mean, why do you think this is well, not why, but how do you think this has occurred? Is it simply because whilst the technology of the cars is new and there are new opportunities available, the industry and particularly the motor trade is still old-fashioned? Is that too simple a reason, or is there more?
It's partly that. The primary reason, which our report, the quantitative and the qualitative data, we had about 4,000, I think, survey responses, and then some focus groups, which we ran with Hive, British Gas, because they were interested, obviously, in the charging. The primary issue that the report threw up is that women are not being spoken to about electric cars with the information, the advice, the reviews, any of the content that anyone is producing about electric cars right now. It's not reaching women. And so women aren't informed, and therefore they don't have the confidence to go out and buy one, and therefore they're not engaging. So we need to look at, well, why are women not informed about electric cars? Why do they not read or see or hear any of this content and men do? Is it that women are more stupid than men? No. So why is this content not reaching them? And when you look at it and you look at the behavior of women, women don't want to read car magazines. We don't want to watch car reviews on YouTube. We don't want to watch car television programs. We want cars. We drive cars and we want cars. So we want to read about cars, hear about cars, watch videos on cars, whatever, where we exist, which is not in automotive verticals, as it were. So not in automotive publications. We want to read about cars in the women's magazines that we read. We want to hear about cars at the events that we go to, like we go to cultural events, we go to food and drink festivals, we take our kids to places, we go to well-being things and spas and gyms and garden centres and cookery places. Why are cars not being talked about in those lifestyle spaces? Why does the entire industry, whether it's OEMs or retailers, why do we all sit back and wait for women to be in market for their next car, wait for them to come to us and then talk to them about cars? Because by the time they come to us, they're already defensive. They're already thinking, I don't know what I want. I don't like this environment. I feel uncomfortable. I think I'm going to be ripped off. They're already dreading the process. We know that. So we've got to get all the messaging about electric cars, advice, messaging about how to charge it, range anxiety, all those things to women where they exist. So we need to think creatively about what kinds of, and we need to use language that women engage with. So we did this, we've done this fantastic research all the way through my last 5 years at Auto Trader, where anytime we do a big survey from car owners, so for example with our new car awards every year, we surveyed 200,000 owners. I segment those results by gender and look at the way that women talk about the things they love about their cars, and that's the language they use is far more emotive, it's far more passionate, and then we need to take that language and reflect it back at them as consumers when we're trying to sell them stuff.
Yeah. So I mean, as we know, the retail sector the motor trade sector is still old-fashioned, though. I think a lot of car dealers expect people, whether it's a man or a woman, to walk into that gin palace on a Saturday morning and to talk to them about cars. So having heard what you've just said there are obviously different ways which dealers and retailers can be having those conversations, taking the products out of showrooms and sort of coming up with different ways of communicating and educating people, isn't there?
Yeah, 100%. So I think there's a number of things that retailers can do, and the same applies to OEMs, and increasingly to OEMs going to the dreaded agency model.
Yes.
Is that a word we can use here?
Yes.
There are a number of things depending on budgets, depending on time and effort and so on, but some of them are really quite simple. And the first I say is with your own content on your website or on your social, your Facebook, your Instagram, your social media channels, or in your newsletters or your flyers that you send out to consumers, however you reach out proactively to consumers, got to be really bold in your language, because women are. And we took these verbatims from women that love their cars. We'd ask them, what do you love about your car? And one woman said, I love the glittery magnetic grey paintwork or something, it really shines in the sun. That was her number one attribute for the reason she bought that car. And it was a DB11, as I remember, Aston Martin DB11. So she had a serious amount of cash, but she was unashamed that she bought that car for that reason. And she did just say, I love the gunmetal grey paintwork. She said, I love the glittery paintwork. You know, she threw in some light, warm, slightly humorous adjectives. So where's that language? Let's really get off this kind of stage corporate, I'm not, you know, let yourself go with your language, because what's the worst that can happen? If it's content, if it doesn't fly, if it doesn't engage your consumers, you can delete it and try some different content. So I think, and social media is perfect for being a lot more informative, a lot more jocular, a lot more colloquial with your language. So really go to town. If you've got women working for you, and this is the point about having women working for you, let them do the content. Let that, because actually a lot of women engage with the content, no matter what it says, just as soon as they see a female byline or a woman headshot or a woman presenter on a video. So if you've got women in your organization, it really is that simple. Bring them to the forefront, get them creating the content. But also, you know, I would say as well, if you've got more budget and you're looking at doing marketing and you're looking at doing experiential marketing around your own retailer brand or your products, whatever, hyper local is the key, because women really want to see that you get them and understand their lifestyle, that you are them. So take yourself out of your comfort zone of your retailer forecourt or whatever it is, and take your product out to, you know, take a slot outside the gym on a Saturday morning, take a slot at a point to point or the local village fete. Get involved with local charities, whatever that takes to really embed in the community, because this works, by the way, from grassroots all the way up to massive luxury brands. Anya Hindmarsh, you know, huge global fashion brand, said it's not about cookie cutter huge glamorous stores anymore. It's about hyper local community involvement. I think that's really crucial.
But you say that, and I totally agree with you. But you know, you mentioned agency just a second ago, and to me, a lot of this just seems to be in complete contrast to what you're saying, because we know that manufacturers want to take more control over dealer networks. They want to control the buying process. And you know, especially a lot of the new dealerships that we're seeing spring up, yes, okay, they might look a little bit different, but the role of them is still the same, though, isn't it? So it does seem to me that there's still a long way to go in breaking down these traditional models that we've got.
There's a huge way to go, and that's why I always say, you know, A, the early bird catches the worm, but B, you don't have to move the dial very far to be a huge success, because no one else is doing it. Because, you know, the most that happens is that I ask brands, I ask OEMs, you know, do you market separately to women? Do you listen to women and what they want? And they say, well, no, you know, we wouldn't dream of doing that. We're gender neutral. People think that in this industry that being gender neutral means doing nothing and being passive. But we've had a century of male domination. So in order to get that dial to neutral, we've got to massively shift it. We've got to be really proactive. So the first people to go out there and say, do you know what, I'm going to make an effort here to really understand, really try something. And women appreciate the effort. You don't have to get it right first time. If you're sitting there doing nothing because you're worried about, oh, is it patronizing to women to do this, or is it actually practical? Hopefully you've got some women in your organization you can ask. That's another important reason to take women on board, because the data won't tell you if it's practical or patronizing. Only actual women will be able to tell you that. But if you're not sure, try it, because, you know, what's the worst that can happen? And go, oh, I don't like that. Okay, I'm really sorry. We were trying to engage you, but we've got it wrong. Let us try again. It's all about honesty. It's all about integrity and transparency of your communication. And I don't get it right in communicating with women half the time. So you go again. So I think, but, you know, Genesis, if you look at OEMs, Genesis is a case in point. You know, Genesis launched in Europe just a couple of years ago and came into Europe gunning for female consumers with their small boutique footprints in shopping centres and so on. Their GPAs, Genesis personal assistants, not on commission. It's something that Simon Dixon tried to rock our years ago. We know that. We keep coming back to it because it is the right thing to be doing. and test drives from home, all those things. And I said to them at the time, you only have to be 20% successful. You'll take 20% of the female market. It's no one else is trying it. So it's really about being bold and adventurous and thinking outside the box, 100%.
Yeah. So we've got all of these conversations going on at the moment, but at the same time, and it's amazing that I'm having to ask you this really, but you know, in the last week or so, we've got all these questions in terms of green policies. You know, the government is sort of possibly rowing back on the 2030, 2035 deadline. We're talking a lot more about net zero. There's lots of, all of this is going on. What are your thoughts on all of this? I mean, is it a bit of a distraction, or is it simply not helpful in this journey to electric cars that we're currently on?
I think you only have to look outside the UK at other countries and how they're managing the adoption of electric cars to say that it does not work to be all stick and no carrot. Which is where we seem to be headed as government at the moment. You know, it's 2030 and there are no incentives and there are no grants and there are no other financial incentives for consumers. It's 2030, like it or lump it. Then everyone says, well, hang on, no one's buying EVs because they're still 37, 38, 39% more expensive on average than their petrol or diesel counterparts. So what are you going to do about it? Oh, well, maybe we need to row back on 2030. It seems to be entirely black or white with the government. The same with ULEZ. You know, it's either we have 2030 and we have ULEZ, or we scrap 2030 and we scrap ULEZ because the take up isn't there, or people can't afford to go electric. Yeah. Well, where's the sense in that? Surely we need to keep both. We need to keep ULEZ because you can't argue against air pollution. You can't argue against the need to bring down particulate levels in London across, you know, and you can't argue against climate change, and you can't argue against 2030 as a cutoff. So we need to keep those and we need to encourage uptake. Well, how do you encourage uptake? You need carrots. We need those financial incentives. You know, Norway was going gangbusters and it starts withdrawing those financial incentives, take up slows. You know, I think the industry has done a great job. The industry has done all it can. You know, OEMs pivoted massively, dramatically to an electric lineup, didn't they? You know that as well as I do. And they did a fantastic job. No one's arguing about the product. The product's fantastic, but they can't get the prices down. They've got no more margin to squeeze. The retailers can't take a hit financially. The consumers can't take a hit financially because we've got cost of living crisis. The government has got to step in and say, okay, we will incentivize it through free parking in city centres for EVs, through no dart charge for EVs, no ULEZ for EVs. We will stick a 5,000 government grant back in there. We will raise the £2,000 offering for scrappage scheme to offset ULEZ because that's pointless. £2,000 when you're faced with a £40,000 EV that you've got to buy. All these things, you know, we need to think creatively and outside the box. And I know I was talking to the Department of Transport a couple of weeks ago with one of my auto trader colleagues. We went and talk about No Drive Left Behind, women in the journey to electric. The whole, you know, 300 people from the Department of Transport across all their low carbon areas turned out to hear that because they want to do something. Like the willingness is there. So I think, well, why are we not doing something then? Why are we not reintroducing some of those fiscal incentives?
Yeah, well, I'd like to carry on talking to you about this all day because we haven't even scratched the surface of this, have we? So we'll have to get you back on at some point and talk a little bit more about this. But for today, Erin, thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Well, that's it for today's Car Dealer Live. Join us again very soon. Bye-bye.